Welcome to Sound, Light, and Frequency. We're coming to you right now from Austin, Texas, where we've just recorded an episode of American Alchemy with our friend and podcaster extraordinaire, Jesse Michaels. More on that in a moment. The thing is, Steven Spielberg making a movie called Disclosure Day is really more than just a summer release. This is the filmmaker who has shaped modern UFO culture, going back to Close Encounters of the Third Kind in 1977, moving on to E.T., Taken, and of course, War of the Worlds, with a lot of other projects in between. So when he has returned to the subject in 2026, at a time when UAPs have moved from the fringe to congressional hearings, people start to pay attention. Now, the film's reception tells an important story. It certainly opens solidly. It has sparked debate. Some viewers, they see it as a thoughtful exploration of contact, wonder, and fear, a little bit Close Encounters like. But others wanted to see something closer to actual disclosure. They wanted facts and evidence and answers. So that divide so far is mirroring the UFO community itself. And that's why Disclosure Day belongs on Sound, Light, and Frequency. Our question has never really been whether every UFO movie is part of a government plan. It's more like, what about specific movies? It's why Hollywood keeps returning to this subject decade after decade. Is it entertainment, preparation, distraction, or really something in between? So whether Disclosure Day succeeds as a film is almost secondary. It succeeds as a cultural event because it pushes the disclosure conversation into the mainstream. And it reminds us that sometimes big ideas reach the public through movies before they really do reach us from Washington. So let's get started. Even though Brent Friedman and I are both in the same city and we're even in the same hotel, we are coming to you from different rooms. So let's hook Brent up in here and let's get started. And hey, Brent, good to see you. Let's start by disclosing how many times we've seen the film and where. I'll let you go first.
Thank you. Glad to be here. This is fun doing a show on the run. I saw the movie Thursday night when it opened, or I guess at the night before official opening, with a group of work colleagues. And that was quite an interesting experience because some people didn't even know what the movie was. They just wanted to come and be part of the group. So that tells you that not everyone is not only not aware of Disclosure, but weren't even aware of this movie. The second time I saw it was Friday night after I'd flown to Austin and got in too late to see it with you and your interesting screening.
I did have a couple of we've both seen it twice, that's for sure. I started with a screening in Las Vegas because I was there to record the Why Files with another friend of the show, AJ Gentile. I was recording Why Files there. And that night after recording, I went to the screening and ended up sitting next to George Knapp, who, of course, if you're going to watch a UFO film from Steven Spielberg, watching it with George Knapp, that's pretty good stuff. And I thought, that gets me started. We got to go out afterwards, have a beer and talk about it. And he liked it. It was the kind of movie where George and I are talking about it. And both of us are like, I don't know, man, I have to sit with this a little bit. We both ended up saying that to each other. I want to have a discussion about this on a deep level. But on the other hand, I need to sit in my own head for at least overnight to figure out what I even want to say about it.
Yeah. So anyway, by the way, I was not ready to talk about it after the first viewing. I needed that second viewing.
Exactly. I ended up recording something after it, and I almost want to buy back some of it because I sort of have been evolving in my thinking about it. Anyway, so I get to Austin a few hours before you on the plane schedule, which allowed me to attend a second screening in an IMAX theater that started with a live interview of Steven Spielberg and Emily Blunt. They weren't actually in our theater, but apparently they were doing this live thing throughout the North American continent. So there were IMAXs in Canada, IMAXs in the US, and at the same time, we were all watching the same interview. So that was a very cool way to start it. But frankly, that was eclipsed by who I was sitting next to because I was sitting next to Jesse Michaels. And so George Knapp and Jesse Michaels, it was pretty wild. Jesse loved it. We got done. I said, so what's your take? And he didn't have to think about it. He went, I loved it. So everybody's got different responses to this. It is a little bit like that Rorschach test we always say about things. And listen, as we prepare to get started here, I see why. There are a lot of big ideas in this thing. Obviously, people have spent a lot of time writing and directing and acting in it. there is a lot to like, and there are a lot of questions raised. So that's my starting take here.
Yeah. And I think this being Sound, Light, and Frequency, we're not going to review the movie in a standard form. There's plenty of reviews online. I think I'm excited to do a deep dive into what is actually being disclosed, if anything, into the movie. And what are some of the ideas that Steven Spielberg, as the author and the director and the producer of this movie, wanted to communicate with us after all of the UFO and movies and series that he's made? As we talked about, this is his closing argument. Let's talk about the case he presents.
Yeah, absolutely. And he is presenting a case, folks. I think that's the thing. The bar for this film was already going to be high, but Brent, what he did that, and I'm talking about Spielberg here, that really raised it as high as you possibly can get it. Two things. First, he called it Disclosure Day. Now, yes. I got a lot of friends who don't really know that disclosure has a special UFO meaning. But for all the people who are listening to us right now, we all know disclosure is a thing, right? I wrote that book with Dolan, AD After Disclosure. This is Disclosure Day, the one that sets the mark. This is him saying, this is how it might actually go down. Yeah. So that was number one. And number two, from the point of view of what Spielberg set for anticipations, is I have seen dozens of interviews with him, including the one in that IMAX theater. And in all of them, he basically implies or states outright that this is the truth, that he called Close Encounters speculation, and I guess informed speculation. And that's when he was a young man. Now he's 79 years old. And as we said, when we were preparing to even talk about the hype leading up to the movie, you and I called it Spielberg's closing argument, ? Yeah. I think there's no doubt it is his closing argument. So in that regard, he has asked us and everyone else who's seen it to have a dialogue about it. And I'm ready to do that.
I'm Brent Friedman. Have you ever wondered if there's a secret connection between Hollywood and UFOs?
I'm Bryce Zabel. You're listening to Sound, Light, and Frequency.
Before we start talking about the movie itself, what the story means and all of that, let's talk about the story around the movie, because there was a lot of hype leading up to it, as Bryce alluded to, a lot of trailers. And even interestingly, one of the things that we saw, which I can't remember the last time I'd seen it in a movie trailer, was the director doing an interview or having sound bites within the trailer. That gave everything more of a gravitas, especially when Spielberg said, this is not pure science fiction. This is a movie that he saw as an inevitable reflection of our evolving reality.
Not to mention our evolving reality, but his evolving reality.
Yeah.
His beliefs appear to have shifted a little bit. If you think about his earlier work, you got Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which obviously, if Disclosure Day is his closing statement, that was his opening remarks in the trial, right?
Yes.
Close Encounters. Here's one way to look at it. Remember the tagline for Close Encounters: we are not alone. It was the first time people had that put into their thought pattern. And so now with Disclosure Day, he's moved the ball a little bit. And in fact, he's moved from, I guess you could say, over the course of his career, which is almost a 50-year career at this point, talking about the subject, he's gone from, wouldn't it be wonderful at all if it all turned out to be true? And now he's sort of believing and telling us all of this is true.
Yes. And he said in interviews as well that he feels that there is overwhelming evidence right now that we are not alone. And what he has said is that he had a belief about certain things. He wanted to believe certain things, but with the 2017 New York Times article that came out, where we saw the first actual disclosure of the Tic Tac videos, I think for him, that was a tipping point where he said, okay, now this is confirmation.
Very interesting, Brent, because either it was a tipping point for him, or it's what he is saying was a tipping point for him. Because there's a lot of people, including some that you and I have talked to, who have said, no, I think he's known a lot more than he's let on for a long time. But at least he's portraying it as his tipping point. The interesting thing about what Spielberg has been saying also in those interviews, something I feel very strongly is also the case. He has viewed the phenomenon as something that transcends political and cultural divides. Now, I believe not that it does necessarily, because I think the jury is still out on that. We might have a very political way to look at this and will keep us divided, but it ought to transcend all those things. So in that regard, I wouldn't call it saccharine, but the Spielberg who wants to believe everything's going to be okay, I hope he's right. He has stated on the record that he made this film to bring humanity together through a shared belief that as he put it, the impossible is possible, and to encourage empathy, which is a big word. And we said this is a potential spoiler thing. So I think what we want to say that we possibly have not said yet is, if you don't want us going any further, folks, and you have not seen the thing, right, then we are going to be talking about what's in this film. And maybe you want to stop what you're doing, go away, see the film, come back and pick up where we are. But everybody else is warned. We're not keeping a secret here about what's in the film. We're going to talk about it. And to finish my thought there, empathy is his big theme.
Yes. And what I find fascinating is that he was going for a unifying message, but so far, if you go online, the reviews, the reactions, they're very polarizing. There are admittedly a lot of people that love the movie, that say it's one of Spielberg's best. You've seen that in some of the reviews, and a lot of people are saying that online as well. And the reviews overall are generally favorable. It's had a very encouraging box office opening weekend. I think it did something like 45 domestic, 95 million global. For those of you that don't know those numbers, that's on track to break even or make money, which in the movie business is a hit. So it looks to be a positive overall reception. But again, if you drill down in, people have very different opinions about the movie.
I think the headline probably of Disclosure Day weekend, if you will, is polarization, which I guess is not surprising. We live in a country that is so deeply polarized, in a world that is so deeply polarized. Probably no huge surprise. I will tell you this. I walked out of the first film, the one I saw with George Knapp, and I just felt, you know what? I need to get on the board. Everyone else is reviewing this thing. I'll write a little short review and put it up. And I did. One of the things I said in that one, I was a little disappointed that I wanted more from it. So I kind of laid that out there. And as I said, and we'll get into this later, I am reevaluating that position a little bit, the more you and I have talked about it, et cetera. But I will say this, based on what people said in the comments to what I had said, extremely polarized. There were a number of people who schooled me mightily and said, maybe you should consider this isn't a documentary. It's just a film. And why don't you get over yourself? Which, okay, that's a fair comment. But then there were a whole lot of people that also said, hey, thank you for that, because that's how I feel. And I don't feel like this was the movie that I was promised. And I'm a little pissed off about it. I tried to sort of move down the center a little bit of just to say it wouldn't have been bad if he had been a little more on the truth thing, because if what the truth he's saying in his film is actually what he thinks is the truth, then I may beg to differ a little bit. I'm not sure that it is. But if the bigger truth that he's saying is all that he means by truth, the bigger truth would be the same thing that he said in 1977.
Yeah.
The truth that he has gone back to is we are not alone. And with that, if that's what he defines truth as, then maybe I do need to get over myself, because I totally do believe we are not alone. And he's made that point again, and he's sticking with it. And why not?
I had a similar reaction to your comments, which was I saw the movie with 8 people, and I would say 4 of them loved it. 2 of them really liked it, and 2 of them had more substantial problems with the movie. So even just in that sampling, what I think set it apart, like I did some questioning afterwards to hear why people had certain opinions. The people who tended to love it the most were the ones that went in with no expectations, right? 1 or 2 people actually didn't know what the movie was about. They hadn't heard of the movie, and they came out of it going, wow, what an incredible wild ride. What a great Spielberg movie. then the further you went on the spectrum of people who knew what the movie was, were looking forward to maybe some actual disclosure, they kind of liked it, to they had some issues. The one who disliked it the most was the one who went in with the greatest expectations, probably the way you and I went into it, thinking, oh, wait, so we're going to get truth? There's going to be like real disclosure in this movie of a substance beyond what we would consider disclosure 101, that we are not alone, right? Okay, I think we're all past that. So I think that really depends. That's the lens that determines how much you're going to enjoy this movie. If you completely put aside all expectations and just go in for a great summer blockbuster, you'll probably enjoy it. It's Spielberg. It's a fun ride. If you go in hoping it's going to change your worldview, and you already come into it with a pretty informed worldview, if you're one of our audience, you might be disappointed.
It's so true, but it's not just the UFO issue that's how people have looked at it. Again, I saw it with two audiences. The first audience in Las Vegas was a screening. So people only got into it if they were able to get a screening pass to a June screening of the thing. The second movie was literally the night of, and frankly, they started showing it on June 11th. So this is the night of June 12th at an IMAX. So the first people were the serious minded. I know what this movie is about. I am here to look at it and potentially review it. The second night was people that are like, I can't wait to go see a big summer blockbuster Spielberg movie on an IMAX screen. So again, taking UFOs out of the equation, the first night screening in Las Vegas, when things that were supposed to be humorous happened, I didn't hear much laughter. Nobody was laughing. We were all a group of serious people going, what is he about to say here? What does everything I'm looking at make me think about? And I think a lot of people were like, I'm not here to laugh. I'm here to observe this cultural event. Now, the next crowd at the IMAX, they were there for a good time. And there was a lot of laughter, particularly at the Wyatt Russell character and his reaction to the Emily Blunt character. People were laughing at the things that were specifically supposed to be jokes. So that was an interesting thing. They had a whole different expectation. Some of them probably didn't even know what Disclosure Day technically was about, because a lot of them hadn't seen a trailer or whatever. However, it wasn't just a completely naive audience, because like I said, I was sitting with Jesse, and afterwards, Jesse Michaels is getting everybody under the sun coming up to talk to him because he's well known in Austin. Yeah. And at the same time, he's well known for what he knows about this topic. So a lot of people wanted to hear what he had to say, wanted to shake his hand and get his autograph or whatever. A mixed bag. But again, different reactions based on the expectations that you brought into it. And I have to admit, Brent, that applies to me as well. Certainly had my expectations, and I reacted the first time one way. The second time I reacted in another way.
Absolutely. I had two quite different reactions, even though both audiences that I saw it with were general public. So I had laughter and enjoyment and some applause at the end in both screenings. And so really the only thing that changed for me was the expectations I brought in, the lowered expectations I brought into the second screening. So that's been the reaction. I want to get into something specifically and personally, my reaction to the movie, which is something very specific, but it annoyed me. And so I want to talk about it. In the trailer, the very first trailer, I think the teaser trailer that you and I did a whole breakdown on for Need to Know. We went deep into the weeds. And in that trailer, I remember we talked about this. We talked about the fact that there was a scene in which Josh O'Connor's character, I believe his name is Daniel, says 7 billion people deserve to know the truth. And that was his motivation for disclosing to the public all in one day with whatever media that he seemed to have stolen. And I remember we talked about that and went, wait, hold on a second. Okay. There's a couple, and this was the first teaser trailer, so we didn't really have a lot to work on, right? We had a few puzzle pieces here and there. We talked about the possibility, wait a minute, is this set in the 1990s or 2009 when the population was only 7 billion around? Wait a minute, there was something that looked like a flip phone in the movie. That's around the same time. So there was that whole line of thinking. And then there was the thinking, oh, wait a minute. What if the 7 billion is in reference to the fact that this Daniel character might know there's a billion people on the planet that already know the truth. Maybe the deep state, maybe spread across the planet. There's a billion deep staters and eliters that know the truth. They don't need to be disclosed to. So that would account for the 7 billion instead of 8 billion. Or the third choice was, what if it's hybrids? What if there's a billion hybrids on the planet? Because everyone was theorizing that this is what the story was about. So take all of that. That's the opening trailer. In the movie, Bryce, the line has changed.
Absolutely. I think there's a Mandela effect for you. It's, wait, no, I thought it, totally.
Absolutely. So now in the movie, what he says is 8 billion people deserve to know the truth. And I sat there and had that exact thought. In the movie theater, I'm going, wait, is this a Mandela effect? Did I completely misremember us doing that breakdown 6 months ago? Am I losing my mind? You weren't there to talk to. So I'm just sat there for a lot of the movie going, wait, I'm so confused. What did I see? Okay. So how do we explain that? Why did that happen?
Well, before you explain it, well, this is a how did that happen moment. Because I felt the same thing. I practically fell back in my seat when I heard the 8 billion. It raises a practical question about the production. Okay. First of all, in order to get 7 billion people into the trailer, hundreds of people had to look at that, not the least of which were David Koepp, who wrote it, and Steven Spielberg, who directed it, and then the entire marketing teams. Somebody had to be able to say, I don't think that's right. I think there's 8 billion people. And yet there it is in the trailer. And then in the movie, the same exact scene is Josh, who plays Daniel, saying 8 billion. So the question I have is, was it recorded incorrectly at 7 billion? And then basically somehow it got through the trailer. And then somebody came along and said, yeah, we got to fix that. And did they fix it with the voiceover in the film? Or when they were shooting, did they do this on purpose and have the Daniel character say 7 billion and then say, now let's read that again with 8 billion? And did they mind mess with us on purpose? And if so, why would anybody do that?
Yeah. So this is what I want to drill down into, because I'm going to take the first option off the table. You and I have been in countless productions for TV shows and movies. Nothing is left to chance. Everything is checked and rechecked. Right. And this is one of the most important movies, not just of this year, but in a while. It's Steven Spielberg. It's his closing argument. This is going to be one of the big movies of 2026. You're telling me that they mistakenly, at the script stage, when you've got cast and crew and executives and everybody reading the script, thought that the present day population was 7 billion. No one caught it. It went through all of the drafts. They recorded it in the movie. They put it into the movie. They made trailers from it. The trailer houses looked at it, and still no one figured out, wait a minute, I think we have a problem here. So they put it out and then retroactively said, ooh, we need to fix that. Can you go back and reshoot it? I just don't believe that, which then leads us to the second possibility.
Yeah.
And the question is, why? Why would that have been done, this manipulation, to get us thinking that the story might be one thing, and then to come back and you watch the movie and it says, oh no, this is something else.
At the time when we reviewed that, and I know people are like, these guys are making a mountain out of, somebody are saying that, but remember, there are only two options. The first option was, okay, or at least we thought there were two. One is it's a time frame situation that obviously somehow the movie is set in the past when there are only 7 billion people. But the other was, what they say in that trailer is, are they people? And he says,
yeah. 7 billion people, and then 8 billion people deserve to know the truth.
But then the other question is, were a billion people hybrids? Those were the two sort of things we were playing around with. Anyway, floor is yours again.
Yeah. So I think the point here is that a change was made. That's irrefutable. Why it was made, I'm saying it could not have been a mistake. I just absolutely refuse to believe that, which means it was intentional. What was the intention? And let's say that the intention was to get people talking, to mislead us, to start a conversation. Okay, fair enough. But if as you said before, the point of the movie for Spielberg was to create a unifying message to bring everyone together, then why would you do something that's deliberately manipulating people up front? It feels antithetical to the intention of the movie.
What is your personal take at this point then?
I have to believe that if it was intentional, it was to get a conversation started and to get people thinking that who are the billion people out there that already know the truth, right? And to make it seem like, wow, there is a billion, again, either deep state or elite that already know the truth, and or there are some mix of a billion aliens and elites on the planet. The whole point is that 7/8 of us don't know the truth and 1/8 of us do.
Right.
And I think maybe that's could be part of his message. It just seems that to do it in the form of a manipulation where people are going to, how many people must have thought this was the Mandela effect and been confused?
Yeah.
That does not feel like, let's all come into the tent and be talking the same story. That feels like we gamed you to start a conversation and to get some marketing traction. I don't know.
Before we get into, I guess it's an open question at this point, although maybe by the time this airs, somebody will have pinned Spielberg down and asked him or David Koepp, and somebody will say something. Before we plow ahead into a very interesting observation that we've got to make here, I think let's just take a second and explain what the essence of the film is, because we said there were spoilers in it. So let's go ahead and tell the story. So when we talk about the next section, people can say, okay, I get it. I know what you're talking about. So basically, this is a chase movie that's about disclosure. There are two main characters, of course, and the Daniel character is the guy that has been working for a covert, not governmental organization, but a covert cutout organization in the private enterprise world called Wardex. And these are the people who basically have gathered all the information about the reality of NHI contact over 79 years, as they say several times in the movie, since Roswell. And that these people have suffered kind of a rebellion from within. They're a breakaway group already. They have broken away from the government. There's a sub-breakaway group within the breakaway group that is now stealing this information because it's all classified and heavily guarded, but stealing this information. And his plan, as he says in that first trailer, is full disclosure everywhere all at once.
Yes.
Right? That's the plan. That's the disclosure day plan. So he goes on the run. Now, we said we weren't going to review the movie, but a little bit goes a long way here. For me, the thing that alienated me on the first viewing was just the idea that if these people were in charge of a 79-year secret, the Wardex people, there's a little bit of the gang who can't shoot straight. They have multiple chances to shoot him and can't seem to land a bullet. They chase and are eluded multiple times. And there's Spielberg is given a lot of credit for being a master director, staging things. There's an incredibly clumsy moment along a fence line that I don't need to go into, but where you just go like, what is this guy thinking, this character? Why is this scene being played this way? And I don't buy it at all. And so I ended up feeling, gosh, I wish there was a little more disclosure and a little less chase movie. That was my first take. On the second take, I'm willing to just say, you know what? Okay, it's not a perfect world. I'm just going to have to allow that to be part of my experience, and I'm not going to get hung up on it. So what happens, of course, is that the second character, played by Emily Blunt, who is Margaret
Fairchild,
Fairchild, and she is a weathercaster in Kansas City. And by the way, this is an aside, Brent, I don't know if you and I have even spoken about this. When I was starting out in TV news, I literally was doing the weather in addition to anchoring and reporting. And I literally did do a 7:25 cut in every morning to the Today Show, as she is late for. So when I was watching her racing to get to the station to do her cut in, I was like, boy, I've been there. I've done that. That felt very similar to me. Anyway, so what happens is she has been triggered by seeing a
red cardinal.
And suddenly she's speaking different languages. This is the spoiler part. She's speaking Russian. She is speaking Korean. She is speaking alien, right? And she's reading minds. And she's doing the mind meld trick from Star Wars, where she's able to tell people how to think about things. She's actually able to render certain things invisible. And that was, to be quite honest, my first viewing reaction was, this feels like a Marvel origin story movie to me. This is the movie where the main character gets their superpowers.
Mm-hmm.
And so these were the things. I was seeing it more as a movie. We're both screenwriters. One of the negative parts of being a screenwriter is it's hard to give yourself over to an experience because you're seeing, it's like you can't work in a sausage factory and eat a sausage afterwards without thinking about how it got made. So there's a bit of that. Anyway, what ends up happening, of course, is that ultimately they're going to succeed at that. And we can get into that later. But
let's connect two more dots here. One is the story is running in parallel at first. It's Daniel's story along with his girlfriend, Jane. And then
who's very good.
Yeah. And then there is Emily Blunt's character, Margaret, and her boyfriend, played by Wyatt Russell, son of Kurt Russell. And so these two stories converge, maybe about a third of the way, halfway through the movie. I don't remember. But when they converge, both these two characters come to realize they have a connection. And that connection was they were both abducted when they were children. And during their abduction process, were given some sort of alien upgrade. We'll leave it at that. We're going to go into this in a deeper level in a moment. And then they went on to live their lives. Now they've both been activated because Disclosure Day is upon them, and they are going to play a part in it. And so this leads us to something that I found interesting going in was, I wonder who's going to disclose in this movie. There's a lot of options on the table. Yeah. It could be the government finally disclose, a little bit like the Trump administration is doing right now. It could be that the deep state wants to disclose. Who came to us? JC, out of Office of Naval Intelligence, saying slow drip disclosure. Maybe they were going to just pull the Band-Aid off finally. It could be the aliens themselves were wanted to disclose. It could be public crusaders, which seems what the story was going to be because, as you said, the Daniel character is part of a human faction that has broken away that wants to become crusaders and pull off that Band-Aid. So all of these were on the table. And I think it's interesting that what we ended up getting was not one of those lanes, but more of a combo platter. What we really have is we have that breakaway faction of humans. But what we find out is that they are being driven secretly, not to be revealed until later in the movie, by an alien.
I want to go there because this is such a fascinating thing, folks. You're going to hear this. But a couple of other linchpins here. Spielberg is saving his big reveal for the end. So he's got a big ending.
Yes.
You give us just a couple of teases to say that what this Daniel character has on, it isn't just a single hard drive. He's got these little sticks that are probably gigabyte or terabytes by themselves, and he's got dozens of them. So there's a lot of shit, right? And he's got it. And they show us a couple of things. He shows it to his girlfriend who's demanding answers. Two scenes that I thought were pretty interesting. The first is something that has only been a smile thing in ufology over the years. And it is the fact that Richard Nixon in February of 1973 took the comedy star Jackie Gleason to Homestead Air Force Base and showed him alien bodies, which Spielberg is saying actually happened. Now, I have no direct knowledge that actually happened. I think it's possible, but Spielberg is saying this is the truth. He puts it in as the first piece of evidence that anybody sees. Now, that's a strange choice if he doesn't know for sure that actually happened.
And granted, we do not know for sure, but what we do know is that obviously Jackie Gleason has passed on. His wife, though, said in later years that it was absolutely true. And Jackie Gleason built a home that was shaped like a UFO.
And
right?
Apparently was deeply disturbed for weeks after this event.
Yeah. So anyway, there's that.
And then the next part, of course, is the one that we haven't heard about, right? That first, the Jackie Gleason thing, it's like, wow, you're confirming that? Of all the things that you could confirm, Steven Spielberg, that's your opening gambit? Kind of interesting choice, as I said. The next piece shows us an alien that has been recovered from a crash, I believe. the medical people are abusing it. It's screaming and obviously in pain, and they don't care. Two things come out of that. The first one, based on Jackie Gleason, is he did something with the Jackie Gleason thing that has no one's ever perfectly connected, which is the idea that if Richard Nixon, a president, could show bodies to a comedian, then the people who are in charge of maintaining the secrecy have a problem. And the problem is the president, this guy who is elected for 8 years maximum, this employee of the government can't be trusted. You sort of understand where the Wardex private enterprise thing comes from, because they say, we got to get this out of the government. Fascinating conclusion. And the second thing is Spielberg is saying with this second piece of video that gets shown that it isn't just the aliens being bad to us. We've been bad to aliens. We should feel bad about how we have treated aliens. Now, that was another place, Brent, to be quite candid, where my first viewing made me say, what? Really? What about the hundreds of thousands of people who have been abducted and who are traumatized by the abduction? What about the many thousands of structural sightings by pilots and police officers, the things we always talk about? What were they for? What was that all about? And why haven't they told us who they are? So these were things that raised questions. And having said that and teed it up, go for it.
Yeah. And I want to jump on one thing you just said there, which is, yes, as we kind of alluded to, the movie didn't address the wider spectrum of the UFO experience, or specifically the abductees stories. But on that point, I think this is where the movie took its own liberties. They needed an emotional hook. And I think one of the things that, if you think about it, we talked about this going all the way back to Dark Skies. When you have your main character say humanity deserves to know the truth about aliens and UFOs, that's just very ideological and a bit abstract. Right. But when you say there are alien beings and they're beautiful, gentle creatures and they are being tortured by humans, suddenly you have that kind of feeling of animal activism, right? And you know how most people feel about hurting animals. So I feel like the emotional core of the movie, as stated by Steven Spielberg, is that empathy is a superpower.
Yes.
And so this was all part of the theme. And at that moment, the plot mechanic, somehow Josh saw this and was so hurt by this image that he decided to do what he was going to do, and felt that because these aliens are being tortured and they're beautiful beings, then we need to get the word out to stop this from going on. That was really the emotional engine driving the train in this movie.
And if anything, I believe that is the core issue, Brent, for why the UFO community is split on this film.
Yeah,
because that is something Spielberg has been floating mostly in his work over time. Certainly Close Encounters, they're space brothers. They're coming out. They come in peace. It's beautiful. E.T., he's a cuddly scientist. He's just a nice guy. Who would want to beat up on E.T., right? That's terrible. Now, he has explored other themes in, of course, Taken, although he gets to some of the same space he gets in Disclosure Day in Taken. And of course, The War of the Worlds is,
right.
He always said that was an exception to his rule, that he was just doing
and also to update that movie, if you remember, which we've just talked about in a recent episode, they were no longer Martians. They were no longer alien. They were biomechanical machines that buried under the earth for a long time. So that's a very different premise than what he's positing.
Well, but he has done his share of invasion. He did that with War of the Worlds. But if you think about it, Falling Skies, his TV series, is a nasty, don't be nice to aliens because they do not come in peace kind of invasion thing. So I do think that there are people who think he's naive. And I would describe my own opinions about whoever these occupants are. And I think there may be multiple varieties of them. I just feel like I go with Reagan's nuclear policy, trust but verify. So I want to believe aliens are here for good reasons, or whether they're aliens or something else. But I haven't seen the evidence myself, so I'm not ready to cut him that slack. And that's part of the issue of the movie. This movie cuts the slack. It totally does.
Yeah. And probably for the sake of entertainment. I think at the end of the day, that's Steven Spielberg's day job, right?
Yes.
Whatever he might be trying to accomplish, or we hope he's accomplishing with actually being a disclosure crusader, his number one job is to make blockbuster movies.
Sure.
And so there's been some reductionism in terms of what the agenda is, I think. Now let's go back to that elderly gray.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. The elderly gray who is driving disclosure behind the scenes they've named it. It's called In Vivo 17. So it's two words, INVIVO number 17. And he is the one that apparently convinces Hugo character played by Coleman Domingo, who is part of that breakaway faction from Wardex, to hire Daniel, who's a hacker out of prison because why? Daniel is an experiencer. And Daniel is going to be one of the ambassadors, like Margaret, who gets activated to play their role in Disclosure Day. But all of this is being orchestrated behind the scenes, in the shadows, off screen. You don't learn this until much later in the movie, by an elderly gray alien named In Vivo 17.
My Latin, by the way, is not so good. So what's In Vivo all about?
Yes. So the technical definition is within the living. Mm-hmm. And what it refers to is the biological processes or experiments or tests that are conducted inside a complete living organism, such as a human, animal, whatever, usually done in a laboratory setting. So how does this apply to the movie? Both of these kids, as we talked about, Daniel and Margaret, were abducted as children. And we see a flashback or a memory recall of that scene later in the movie, where they are both inside a ship now with a strange alien device coming down that's looking into their eyes and doing things that are changing their retinas. We're seeing all sorts of downloading going on. And what we find out, of course, is that they are being upgraded. So In Vivo 17 was the alien that is conducting this experiment. And so he is the one that, for whatever reason, they've named In Vivo. And I think you and I talked about this, but why 17? What does the 17 refer to?
I don't know, but I will say this. On the most basic level, it means there were probably 16 before him, whether they were failed or there was something else. But you don't get to 17 without 1 through 16. So there is that.
Yeah. And you could think, was it In Vivo 17? Did they capture him in 2017?
By the way, there is a question that will be raised here. I just want to address it so we don't get a lot of comments. When you say that the alien who is looking over them while they're abducted is In Vivo 17, how do we know that?
Because he's speaking the same clicking language. We don't. I'm inferring it because we never saw any other aliens in the movie.
I think you're correct, by the way. I'm just saying there will be somebody going, you don't know that, and they'll have another theory or whatever. But for purposes of our theory, we're inferring that they have, and the key thing here, of course, is we think of grays as about yay high, right? And small and spindly. In Vivo 17, as ultimately revealed, is going to be what we call a large gray.
Yeah, like probably 7 or 8 feet. He towered above both Emily Blunt and Josh O'Connor. Yes, and in the current kind of ufology depictions of grays, the larger grays are the ones in charge, and the smaller grays are apparently their worker bees. So, granted, there are no smaller grays that we've saw in the movie. And yet there's an interesting thing later that we learn that the grays can present themselves as animals to make us calm, but there's several of them. There's like a deer, a fox, a raccoon, a bird. So clearly there were more than one gray, but it seems that the elderly gray In Vivo 17 was the one in charge because, of course, he's the one that's brought out at the end of the movie as the evidence of biologics that everybody.
By the way, when you describe the elk, the bird, the fox, the whatever, what was the fourth one?
The cardinal.
The cardinal. They describe that they can be perceived by humans as animals. The thing is, one of the criticisms of as a film people have made is they seem very CGI. They don't feel authentic, particularly the fox. People are just freaked out that the fox looks so fake. And they're thinking, Spielberg's got all the money in the world. Why doesn't he do a better job giving us these animals? So I tend to, so some people are criticizing the movie for that. I tend to take the position that is correct. Spielberg had all the money in the world to make a great looking fox and chose not to. And the only reason not to is he's trying to give us the cue, I think, that they're not perfect. They're just these comfortable representations of animals in the human context.
Almost like
they're avatars.
Yes.
Yes. That's it. They're avatars.
Okay. So staying on In Vivo 17 to connect some dots, you've all seen in the trailer, if you haven't seen the movie yet, the famous now scene where Margaret is doing a newscast. She can't get through the first sentence or two, and she starts speaking in a clicking language, right? We learn later that the message that she's imparting to everyone that's watching in that clicking language is, don't be afraid of what you don't know. So it's I know aliens look scary. I know we're big and confusing and the other, but don't be scared of us. That was the preamble message, if you will. But this already feels at odds with one of the main ideas of the movie. How did that alien speak through Emily Blunt or Margaret, the Margaret character? The only word that comes up, and everyone said it from the very first trailer, was possession. So you're already showing the mechanics of something that people call demonic, because Emily Blunt hadn't been activated yet to the extent that she knew what was going on. She had already started having weird speaking other languages and whatnot, but she didn't understand what it all meant. And so this In Vivo 17 is speaking through her body, using her body against her will. And there is no other way to interpret that than possession. You could say, but it's a benign message. It's for the good. That's great. But nobody asked her about it.
Now, what's interesting about what you just said about the possession, it is true. It looks like the phrase they use in the movie is dive on.
Dive on, yes.
She's been dived on and possessed by clearly an alien force. But what's potentially another point of confusion or explanation is that there's this device that is used in the film, this little about yay device, a metal device that you hold in your hand like this and allows you, particularly the Colin Firth character who runs Vortex, the secret keeping organization, it allows him to take technological possession of other people. So his name is Scanlan, by the way, and he takes control of Eve Hewson's character, Jane, and tries to make her kill Daniel.
Yes.
There are a few moments just from a film viewing thing where her eyes are doing what I can't do it, but whatever. She's making eyes at the guy that look like, hey, I'm in a killer movie and I've been possessed by the devil and I'm going to take you out now. So what's the deal with this device? What's your take?
They really don't explain it. In the movie, Vortex seems to have, before the movie starts, Vortex has 3 of these devices. Right. 2 of them are stolen by the Hugo-led faction that recruits Daniel. So they take 2, they leave 1 behind. I'm not sure if you're going to start stealing stuff, why don't you steal everything? But they leave 1 behind. And so what it seems to me, because they really don't give any exposition on this, is that these gray aliens, like In Vivo 17, have the ability without a device to jump into people's minds, take control of them in the same way that Colin Firth does or Scanlan does within the movie, but he needs the device. So humans, even activated humans like Margaret, need that device to have these extra powers. The aliens do not. So I feel that what they did was somehow along the way, they gifted humans these kind of training wheels, these little devices that would allow them to experience the powers that they have. So again, how those ended up with Vortex, they never explain. Why only 3? They never explain. There is an interesting thing where at one point in the movie, so many bad things are happening and the Margaret character is using one of these devices to make everyone invisible that she's trying to protect and turn on power and do all sorts of other things. And the device essentially gets spent. Like this thing that looks like a technological kind of baton ends up just crumbling into dust because it's been used up like a battery.
That's very strange. And I don't think we're ever going to get the complete answer, although the screenwriter, David Koepp, I believe, did say in an interview that if he had given even one more power to this device, that it would be too much because it would have become the magic wand. So he has deliberately in this screenplay, which is based on the story from Steven Spielberg, he has made clear that the humans in the film don't understand how it works, except for the two things it seems able to do, which is act as a weapon, we've seen, where you possess somebody and can do what you need, and also other things it's done, but also it's a means of discovery. So it's multifaceted already, and it's mysterious.
Yeah. So, and one thing I want to drill down on here, which is a key plot point in the movie, is this device that you can dive on people. You learn pretty quickly in that they cannot do it to the Daniel character. That would be the obvious way to literally eliminate the whole plot of the movie, is if Scanlan and Wardex could just zoom in and take control of Daniel's body, like they later do with Jane, then the movie would be over. But they can't do it. Do you remember why?
No. Why?
Because Daniel was an experiencer.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Somehow we find that this dive-in process will not work on experiencers. Being an experiencer myself, this feels completely counterintuitive, right? The whole idea of being an experiencer is that you are more open to things, right? You have a more kind of just philosophically open mind, but you are also probably more open, sensitive wise to different frequencies and different realities that are out there. And so that would, in my mind, make it more that you would be much easier to dive into or dive onto than an ordinary person. But they're flipping the whole idea around.
Absolutely. I got to ask the one question that I just, even with the two viewings, I don't understand it exactly. And I don't even know if I agree with it. But the idea is Colman Domingo, again, who is leading the breakaway group from the breakaway group. So in other words, the breakaway group is trying to keep it all secret. The breakaway group from inside the breakaway group is trying to get the secret out. But somehow these two main characters have been brought together and they are part of the Disclosure Day plan. The aliens plan are using them somehow in concert with the sub breakaway group to get disclosure out. And one of the things that Colman Domingo says to them, he goes, "It's about you two. It's always been about the two of you." Okay. Yes. I get that from a chosen, they even called themselves chosen. All right. So that's something that shows up in stories all the time. People are chosen to be given their special powers and all that. But I think it's very clear over time, many people have claimed to be abducted. So my question is, if these two were the chosen one, what about Betty and Barney Hill? What about Travis Walton? What about Whitley Strieber? What about the hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not more than that, of people who have claimed some form of experience through abduction? Not all of those people are happy they were abducted. Not all of them were given powers. Not all of them were given insight. Some of them were just messed with. So I don't understand what the movie is saying about the entire abduction plan. What was that all about?
And one other thing to add to that list of what about everyone outside of America? All of those characters that you talked about, it all took place in America, right? This is a global phenomenon we're talking about by all accounts. And the two chosen for disclosing to the whole world were from the same town in America. It's coincidental.
The American idea that is also something, because every time I'm interviewed by a news organization, I always make it a point to say, this is not just a U.S. situation. This is a global phenomenon. And if it's a solution, it's global. If it's a problem, it's global. Okay. Yeah. As we know, as we've said, Spielberg was given a lot of money to make this movie, but it basically takes place in New Jersey, Kansas, rather, but shooting in New Jersey. Yeah. If you have a lot of money, why didn't the Bourne Identity with the same kind of budget has shot all over the world? I just feel like, why wasn't one of these characters abducted from another part of the world, this world, and they're brought together? And why? Because the chase feels small and ineffective. And I don't want to be a guy beating a dead horse, but that is the number one thing that undermines it as a great film. Because the very basic things that you say, Spielberg's got that covered, baby. There are some plot points, holes where you just say, these Vortex people would easily have found them. And instead of firing multiple bullets and missing them every time, they'd have had one bullet and put it in his head and ended it. So there's a undermining effect to it. That's all I'll say.
Look, I agree with you. I think we could go through the plot pretty closely and find a lot of issues. But I think let's focus for a moment on the bigger picture here, some of the messages and implications in the movie, and evaluate that. We talked about before this idea of 7 billion to 8 billion. Was that to get people having a conversation about hybrids? I know one of the people I talked to after my first screening was, in this movie, are they hybrids? Are Margaret and Daniel hybrids? Because they're not entirely human. They're not all human. Because why? They were abducted and their whole DNA seemed to have been rewritten. They were upgraded. So now they're humans or in a human body, but they have a whole alien intelligence and capabilities. So is that a new form of hybrid? Right? Where it used to be think that, oh, I've got a little bit of alien DNA and I've got a little bit of human DNA and I grow up and look at me, I'm a hybrid. This was more, no, these were kids that were 10 years old. So pretty, well-formed humans that were then altered. Does that constitute being a hybrid?
By the way, what's the movie? Is it District 9? Is that the one that is, you're right. That guy ends up getting alien stuff in him and it ain't good, right?
No.
This is the sweetness and light version of being abducted and messed with by aliens, because they both are upgraded and life is good. In fact, if I could get that kind of upgrade, bring it on, because that would be a lovely upgrade to have.
So then the implication, though, is that these two that were activated, that got these two upgrades, represent now the aspirational bar that all humanity needs to get.
Correct.
So is the message of the movie, everyone needs to just bite the bullet and get abducted? Everyone's going to have to go through that same really terrible procedure.
We're going to get into the message of the movie. I think we need to work backward from the actual final ending of the film.
Yes.
And what happens at the ending is they end up at the Kansas City television station where, without getting into all the details, they commandeer the feed and manage to feed out these many terabytes of data on a multifaceted video stream that seems to go everywhere, as he said, all at once. Okay. Mm-hmm. And this takes you to your in vivo 17, because, and again, this is deep spoiler. If you've been with us so far and you're like, hey, I don't, maybe I should go. Yes. If you haven't seen it, go watch it, because this is deep spoiler. Because what's the one thing people have said during the government tranches being released and everything, Brent? They always say, you know what? Show us the saucers. And if you, which is the video feed. Yeah. They also say, show me a freaking alien.
Yeah.
So that's what the director does. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, at the very end, in the backdrop of the Daniel character has downloaded all of the media that he stole. So you see on this big wall of screens, all of these videos, all of the video evidence is being disclosed to the public. It's all streaming, right? All around the world, seemingly. But then the piece de resistance that's going to close the deal, because of course anyone can look at videos now and say, oh, well, that's fake. That's AI. But it's much harder when you roll out an 8-foot alien that's live in a TV studio.
That's what they do.
That's exactly what they do. And this thing is in a whole contraption, and it stands up, and that it's like an old man getting up out of a chair, and it stands up. It towers over Daniel and Margaret, and then it leans down to Daniel, and it speaks in the clickety-clack language to him. Why? Because his superpower is that he can understand the alien language. Why? Because it's math. It's mathematical somehow. And then Daniel, having gotten this message imparted from In Vivo 17, who's behind all of disclosure, turns to Margaret and whispers the message to her. This whole time, we cannot hear it, right? So unless you speak clickety-clack language.
I do not.
You do not. Okay. Just checking. And then, so now imbued with this new message that she is meant to impart to mankind, she has a glow on her face, like, okay, I know what I'm supposed to say. She walks back over, and the final shot of the movie is her looking straight into the camera, like she's addressing the world. And we, as the audience, are now part of that world. And she says one word, and the word is listen. Roll credits.
Listen. Yeah. Okay.
Like that.
Okay. Yeah. Listen.
Let's hack that.
Listen. There, I just did it instinctively. Listen. Okay. Lots of questions raised by that. Okay. If someone tells me to listen, that doesn't impart information to me. That's, hey, listen up. Okay. What are you here to tell me? But then we go to black. And so we don't tell anybody anything. So I'm just going to throw that out there. When you heard that, what do you think she means?
The first viewing, I was just confused. I was like, okay, I'm listening. And then I kept thinking, oh, there's going to be a Marvel scene. Yeah. Like Marvel has like a scene that's embedded in the credits. So you stick around, you wait through a long set of credits, and there's nothing else I'm supposed to be listening to. So I was disgruntled upon the first time I saw it. And then a couple days later, when I saw it again, I thought, oh, this is interesting. Maybe the message is, let's go back to what are most people who are our audience, who are people that are understand ufology, what are they immersed in? They're immersed in all of these facts and figures, and they're watching all of these disclosed videos and media and photo that's coming out of the Trump administration. And so maybe the message to them and to everyone else is listen to what is happening in the real world right now, right? Listen, pay attention. So that was my thought, was that this whole movie feels like getting your attention for 2.5 hours. And now asking you, the call to action at the very end is Spielberg saying, I want you to listen to everything that's happening in the real world. The movie's over. Now listen to what the Trump administration is saying. Listen to all of the strife in the world, where empathy would be an amazing thing that could help take all of the ideas in here and listen. So I think that's somewhat backed up by some of the stuff that the screenwriter David Koepp said. Did you see anything that he said in that interview that he gave about the movie?
One thing he said that I thought was interesting is that it's the first thing he ever wrote when he got Spielberg's draft, and he put that in there. And so it was in there from every draft on, which means both he and Spielberg said, this is a great ending, man. We should go with this. So I know they loved it. I'm still reeling a little bit, don't quite have it all figured out, but I know other people would probably leave comments saying, you idiot, it's so obvious, but it's not obvious to me. I'm sorry. It's just not.
Yeah. And then there's just even the broader thing of, hopefully, I'm sure in the filmmakers' minds, the film sparked conversation. So go out and listen to the conversations that are happening around the movie.
That's a good explanation.
Maybe you don't understand everything. Maybe some people know more about. Listen, just get engaged, right? I just found the reference. Koepp says, it just so happens to be the first word of one of my favorite books, Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, which that is a very good book. But it's also the first word of numerous Hebrew prayers. And I believe David Koepp is Jewish. So he says, so I wrote, listen, and then I just typed a period. Because I think when you have one word that says everything you want to say, you should just stop talking.
Listen, I love that he put it that way. That's a beautiful way to put it. I will say, just as an observation, that given that the high point of the film and the end of the film is streaming out many terabytes of actual evidence, visual evidence on all these monitors, and then wheeling out an ancient alien who can get up out of his wheelchair and touch them, it's almost felt to me like she should have said, look, because watch, listen. Because the evidence isn't auditory. The evidence is visual. So it's got to be him saying, okay, we've laid this all out for you. And now talk amongst yourselves and listen for a change. Stop being the people that have to be heard first. Listen, I am willing to listen. I'm listening now. I've been listening for years. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of people who are active in the ufology movement or whatever have been saying this for years themselves to their friends. It's all around you. This evidence is already out. This isn't a secret. Just listen. So yeah, I can see that. I'm willing to cut him slack on that one, and I'm willing to start listening.
Okay. One of the things I thought about was what has actually been disclosed in this movie? Was there anything, any new information or anything that was being taken from this could have happened to some degree of certainty?
Roswell.
Okay. So he not only comes out and says Roswell's was real, but he reconstructs and recreates a whole scene, probably done as documentary style at the Roswell crash itself. So that's one. And then another thing that he comes out and says, wasn't it the Kecksburg?
Pennsylvania. Don't have the date in my head, but Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. And Nixon, Gleason, as we said.
And then I forget, was there some verification of Majestic or Majestic 12 in the movie?
If there was, I'm not aware of it. I don't remember it. I hope there is, because literally as we're recording this, and we'll have more to say on this topic in the future, Brent, but there are several documents that have come out supposedly today as we record this that lend credence to Majestic 12 as being an actual organization that existed to manage this situation going back to 1947 and implicates Majestic in the death of James Forrestal in 1949.
Which we've talked about in a previous episode.
Yes. So I think we will be having more to say about Majestic. So probably we'll figure out if Spielberg is on our team Majestic or not between now and then.
Yeah. Let's bring this home and let's ask the question, both for us and for the general public. Has Disclosure Day advanced the disclosure narrative in any way in your mind?
I'll give you a one-word answer, and you have to listen. Are you ready?
Yes.
Yes.
And what is the way that you feel it's advanced the narrative?
It's just obvious. Even if you don't like the movie, even if you haven't seen the movie, more people around you are talking about this issue now. And look, Dolan and I first talked about after disclosure, and we said it leading up to it would be slow drip disclosure or a hard cut. This isn't the hard cut. It isn't like Spielberg put a movie out and actually put real authentic evidence inside it. And then everybody went, oh my God, it's not just that didn't happen. So there's no hard cut about this thing. But in terms of the slow drip of which you and I have been a part of for most of our careers and has been picking up intensity in 2017 through the Grush situation and the whistleblowers and the testimony before Congress, the Age of Disclosure documentary, and other fine ones like the ones James Fox has done as well. And now this, for sure, this one has delivered to the people something to talk about. And either they're going to say, boy, this really convinced me, or other people will say, what did you think of the movie? They'll end up saying, is this stuff real? Yeah. I've already got friends, Brent, who are texting me and calling me going, so what do you think about the movie? And what they're really asking me is this true?
Yes. And on that point, I want to and this is my own personal interpretation. If I rewind and I go back and I do what Steven Spielberg asked me to do in the trailers, which is consider this more truth than fiction, then I'm going to just at face value take the biggest idea in my mind that he's telling us, which is there are aliens on this planet. They are more advanced than we are in many ways. They can control us with our minds, through our minds, and they can also take the form of animals. Yeah. And now I would say extrapolate that into if they can take the form of animals, they can take the form of humans.
Yeah.
Okay. Whether they're hybrids or not, there are aliens here on this planet that can take control of us and turn me into an alien inside a human body, or they can mislead us and look like animals or humans to interact with us.
Sure.
Any way that I read that, if that was the truth that's being conveyed that we need to get ready for, I find that unsettling, personally. Going back to that first message, don't be afraid of what you don't know. Okay, I'd like to not be afraid, but everything that you're just telling me with my interpretation of it feels unsettling.
It's totally unsettling. And I will, as a closing thought, say, I do think he shied away from one key point, which is everything I'm aware of. And just my own gut instinct is if there's one, there's several. And if there's several, there might be many.
Yeah.
So the idea that it's just the grays out there, including a tall gray, I think is not fully responsive. Not to say that he hasn't told truth, but it is to say maybe he hasn't told the whole truth. And then my final thought would be, because again, I wrote a book about it, I can't wait for the sequel idea, which is, okay, if you're going to lay out all this and say, this stuff's true, they're here, they've been here a long time, there's been a strange interaction with them over all this time, and all the things that you just stipulated, that's a lot to process for us. And the question would be, if I got my hotel TV over there right now, it's on playing some stuff. If what it was playing instead was hardcore contact evidence of the such that Disclosure Day says that they put out, actual video of aliens and crashes and incredible gun camera footage, of which there's some really nice shots in his final montage, how would people react to that? And I would say it's a mixed, like the movie, they'll react in a way that's a mixed bag. So that's what I think is next.
Let's end this with one provocative question. We're midway through our first season. We always talked about this was going to be at the midpoint, which was very exciting when we were back even at episode 1. We're at the midpoint now. We premised this whole show on the idea that there was a secret connection between Hollywood and UFOs. That was our central premise, based on our own experience. And we were going to, through our active investigation, go look at movies and TV shows and see if there was any more evidence. And one of the first pieces of evidence that we presented was the idea that Steven Spielberg might have gotten a deal based on interesting stories and anecdotes. There was no proof of it at the time. Now, fast forward to 2026, Steven Spielberg has a movie come out, coincidentally, possibly, right in the midst of actual disclosure happening. In fact, one of the last feelings I had when I was watching the movie the second time was, up on the screen, there's all of these pieces of media that are being disclosed to the public. And then I come back to my hotel room and there's a new tranche of videos that have just been released by the Trump administration. And it's all overlapping. It's conflating. Where does the movie and reality begin and end? It's all blurred together. So what are the odds that all happened in happy coincidence, right? It seems hard to believe, in which case is the fact that this movie came out with these messages at this time further evidence that Steven Spielberg must be in the know, must be connected in some way, in which case he has come forward and said, I'm going to tell you the truth. That's what's happening here. So is it a secret anymore? I guess is my question to you. Is this connection that we talked about a secret? Not to mention the fact we had Brett Leonard come on our show. We have other people that have told us off camera that they have had similar situations. Hopefully they'll be coming on in the second part of our season. So do we need to change our premise?
I think we are in the midst of changing it. On the topic of Spielberg, the standard I always put is, I would not bet my house that he's on the inside, but I would bet your house on that.
Thank you.
I'm strong on that. And on your comment, is there an end or a beginning that's happening with the Hollywood UFO connection? I would say this is strong evidence for me that we are most likely watching not an end or a beginning, but a convergence where Hollywood and UFOs have been involved from the very beginning, from those flying saucer movies of the 50s, through the time frame that we've been working our way through our own personal experience, through the experience other people have had. Hollywood and UFOs, there has been a secret connection. There remains a secret connection, and it may not stay secret that much longer either.
I think that's a great way to end the show. Hopefully you've enjoyed our deconstruction of the movie and also what the movie might mean to pop culture. Please, when you watch this episode, leave some comments. Tell us about your thoughts, because this is all part of the discussion. And what are we going to do, Bryce? We're going to listen.
Sound, Light, and Frequency is an iHeart podcast produced by Stellar Productions. It's executive produced by Nick Johnson, and for Stellar, Jackie Zabel. Our show's music was written by Anna Stumpf and Hamilton Lighthouser. And your hosts and executive producers are Bryce Zabel, that's me, and Brent Friedman. Watch the skies.